Welcome to the On the Pen, the Weekly Dose podcast, your one-stop shop for obesity medicine news with your host, man on the pen, Dave Knapp. Welcome to the Tuesday, March 25th edition of On the Pen, the Weekly Dose podcast. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, man on the Manjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Manjaro, Zepbound, Compound, that pen. And it's what we talk about each and every week here on the Weekly Dose podcast. We've got a lot to get into today, and I can't wait to unpack it all today. The podcast episode today is going to be a little bit ranty. And you'll have to bear with me. I'm sort of losing my voice. I don't know if I'm coming down with something. We just got back from New York City, where we filmed a video follow-up to our article that I wrote for health.com back in the fall of this year. And so we're super excited to bring that to you. It was a wonderful trip. Thank you for bearing with me because we took last week off. We talked both on the podcast and the Thursday night show, but we're coming back with a vengeance this week. We've got today's podcast, and then we've got a super special interview that I'm excited to announce for tomorrow. Should drop tomorrow evening. We've got an interview with Lee Rosebush, who is the president of the Outsourcing Facilities Association, and he is the one that has been leading the charge against the FDA in the shortage ending of tirzepatide and all the implications there. And we are super, super excited to bring one of the biggest interviews, maybe the biggest interview in the history of this entire saga. And so just an honor to be able to bring that to you. Make sure that you hit subscribe over on the YouTube channel and the bell for notifications so that you get notified when that goes live. Just take a moment to do that right now. Make sure you hit the subscribe and the bell for notifications. But we're going to get right into the news for this week. We talk about current medications. We talk about future medications. We talk a little bit about policy. And then we give something a little bit for the investors too. So, and honestly, all these topics sort of bleed into one another this week. Manjaro was launched in India. Now, this is where things are going to get ranty right off the bat this week. India is paying $160 a month for 2.5 milligram dose of Manjaro. Of course, Manjaro is not rebranded overseas. So whether you're taking it for diabetes or weight management, it's just Manjaro everywhere. So we're going to use Manjaro and Zepbound, tirzepatide kind of interchangeably here, all the same. But $160 per month for the 2.5 milligram dose. If you bump it up to the 5, there's tiered pricing, right? So it's going to go up with each dose. If you're getting the 5 milligram dose, you're going to pay $200 a month. That's $499 here if you're buying the Zepbound vials, right? So, but the list price for Manjaro here, the fully burdened cost on the American system is $1,079. Just a staggering number. For comparison, in the United Kingdom, they're paying around $258 a month for a prescription of Manjaro. In Japan, they're paying around $319 a month per prescription of Manjaro. Listen, we have got to do something about this. This cannot continue at this pace. And, you know, we've gotten into it a little bit lately, but I just think it's worth bearing and saying it plainly that the United States funds the world's drug innovation, not through some sort of formal agreement with the world, but through something, in my opinion, that is far more exploitative of the American people. And that's these unchecked drug prices and the unchecked handshake and backdoor deals that go on between the pharmaceutical companies and the PBMs. The same drugs that cost $1,300 a month here often go for as low as $100 overseas. Why? Because we're the only country that doesn't actually demand a discount, right? The other countries all have mechanisms in place to basically arbitrate with the drug companies and say, if you want access to our market, here's what you need to be. Here's where you need to be at on pricing in order to access our market, right? In the United States, we have that, but it's all done privately with the PBMs. And instead of passing the savings along to patients, it just pads the pockets of big corporate interests like pharmacy benefit managers, insurance companies, and drug companies. So that massive overpayment of these medical drugs in our ecosystem is propping up the entire pharmaceutical industry for every country, for other countries. Many people will kind of come back at that argument and say, well, you're missing the mark here, Dave, because you're not considering the gross to net pricing. The gross to net pricing means that although a drug company may charge $1,000 for a drug, they're actually only taking 500 of that home, right? Because of the rebates that happen with the middlemen. But those savings, right, never reach patients. It's sort of a moot point for patients. It doesn't make our drugs cheaper. And drug makers still walk away with billions and billions of dollars. Just look at their quarterly earnings. If this system was squeezing them, we'd see layoffs and investor panic, not record profits and $60 billion in stock buybacks. Gross to net is a distraction from the real issue being that American patients are paying more than anyone else and seeing less of the benefit. Oftentimes I'll hear people say, well, R&D, Dave, it's R&D. It's expensive. And Americans are just, paying for the innovation. Well, the reality is innovation. Let's talk about it because it often starts right here in the United States. This is a fascinating bit of information. It's oftentimes funded by U.S. taxpayers. So we're getting it on both ends. Case in point, GLP-1, the hormone at the heart of all of these drugs, whether we're talking about Ozempic or Wegovy, whether we're talking about Mounjaro or Zepbound, the hormone at the heart of these obesity drugs was discovered in the 1980s by Dr. Joel Habner and his team at Mass General Hospital in Boston. And that early research was funded by public dollars. And it revealed how GLP-1 stimulates insulin and reduces blood sugar. You fast forward to today, semaglutide, Ozempic, and Wegovy was built on that American discovery. And according to a March 2025 report in the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences, even semaglutide itself was engineered in Boston by teams working at or with institutions like MGH and Harvard before this medication was eventually acquired by Novo Nordisk and brought to market. So while the Danish company cashes in globally, especially on the backs of Americans, the seed funding and the original science and the medical breakthrough was done here. We paid for it. And here's the kicker. Many of these companies are actually spending more on marketing dollars than they are on R&D. So if you think that you're helping pay for the next breakthrough, you're really just funding the next jingle. And the Ozempic jingle is a fantastic jingle, but it is not worth the cost of admission to be able to be on the medication. So you're funding marketing more so than R&D. So one of the other arguments that I'll hear from people is that other countries pay and they're just paying at negotiated rates. Yeah, but they pay less because their governments are negotiating. We talked about this earlier. They're negotiating while over here you have the PBMs negotiating and we never see the benefit. Patients never see the benefit of reduced costs in these prescription drugs compared to the rest of the world. So we're the only country that lets pharma basically name its price and these middlemen come in and take what they want to take with no negotiation, no guardrails on behalf of the patients, just a captive market of desperate people. This isn't a free market. This is not a free market in the United States. It is a monopoly in a lab coat. And the people who suffer the most are the American people. So the bottom line is if you've ever wondered why Ozempic or Mounjaro costs more here in the United States than it does overseas, it's because you're footing the global tab. And the wild part is you already paid once through tax-funded research and science and through the premiums. This is what people always forget, through the premiums that you're paying for your health insurance plan. The premiums, have you looked at these lately? Like, it's amazing. Most of it, because our insurance is tied to our employment, most of us don't really see what we're paying in premiums. take my family, for example. We're paying $30,000 in premiums alone. That's before we ever pay a single bill at a single doctor's office. That's before we ever pay for a single medication. We're already $30,000 in the hole medically because of the cost of our premiums. We're funding innovation. Innovation that is often born here and sold back to us at 10 times the price, and something needs to happen. Something needs to happen. Obviously, we talk about this stuff kind of in the bubble of obesity medicine, but to be honest with you, obesity is such a drag on our economy when you consider the healthcare costs, the lack of production from people who are fighting chronic disease and GDP output. It affects everything. And the interesting thing is, while we innovate these drugs that are making the rest of the world healthy, how often are we actually funding the improved health of countries that are not our friends? And how often are those countries getting the medicine cheaper and more accessibly than we are here in the United States? That is something to ponder as well. So this is a huge issue. And I told you I was going to get a little bit ranty today, and certainly that lived up to it, I'm sure. I'm curious to hear your perspectives here in the comments of this video, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify. Drop a comment and let me know what your thoughts are about the system. What can be done? What can be done? Because we cannot continue to foot the bill for the rest of the world. This isn't 25 years ago or 50 years ago or 75 years ago. The rest of the world has an ability to pay a fair price for the innovation that we bring to the world medically. And I'm not saying we're the only ones that innovate, but by and large, we are the main innovators in the healthcare world. And I just think that this needs to get straightened out, and hopefully it will. So moving on to our second topic, which we talk a little bit about future medications. We talked about this yesterday. News broke. Novo Nordisk acquired a new asset, a triple agonist, very similar to retatrutide. And you saw their stock tank. And I think there's a lot going on with Novo Nordisk right now. And we're going to dig into it a little bit. But let's talk about UBT 251 first, and then we'll kind of put this into perspective of what I think is going on. So it's a triple agonist drug that's targeting GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon, very similar to what we see with retatrutide, which is in phase 3 trials from Eli Lilly. Target launch date for retatrutide is later in 2026. I wouldn't be surprised if that does push maybe into 2027. So we'll actually see orforglipron, the oral small molecule pill, GLP-1 pill, before we see retatrutide. And in between those two drugs, we'll see CagriSema from Novo Nordisk. We'll get back to CagriSema in a moment. So it's designed for obesity and type 2 diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and fatty liver disease. And it was originally developed by a company in China called United Biotechnology, which is part of United Laboratories. So why does this matter? In phase 1B trial in China, the highest dose, which I believe was 6 milligrams, patients lost 15, listen to this number, it's staggering, 15.1% of their body weight in 12 weeks. In 12 weeks. The placebo group obviously did not lose a tremendous amount of weight. And so you're looking at around 15% body weight with this treatment in just 12 weeks at the highest dose. Side effects were similar to other GLP-1s, mostly moderate to mild GI symptoms. Now, Novo Nordisk licensed the global rights, so basically outside of China, Hong Kong, Taiwan. So it's basically, for all intents and purposes, the Western world is what Novo licenses for, and it was $200 million up front, right? Not a bad cost of admission, but with up to $1.8 billion in milestone payments, depending on how the drug does once it hits market, with tiered royalties on future sales. So this is an interesting acquisition. Currently, this drug is in phase 2 clinical trials in China, and it's been approved in the U.S. to begin trials for obesity, type 2 diabetes, and chronic kidney disease, but it's still in early phase 1. So this is where it gets interesting. The best case scenario for this triple agonist that would, again, go head-to-head with retatrutide is FDA approval by maybe 2029. More realistically, probably 2030. So we're talking about a long ways to go. We're talking about lots of medications that will hit the market before this. We're talking about obviously retatrutide. We're talking about obviously some of Novo Nordisk's own medications, right? So high dose oral semaglutide, 50, 25, and 50 milligrams. High dose injectable semaglutide, 7.2 milligrams. CagriSema, cagrilintide as potentially a monotherapy or an adjunct to another therapy. Monlunabant, which Monlunabant's an interesting one targeting cannabinoid receptors. They also have their own obesity treatment of GLP-1 and GIP in phase 2. All of these will hit the market way before this triple agonist. And honestly, what's most interesting to me is Novo Nordisk already has a triple agonist in their pipeline in phase 1, right? So have they learned that their triple agonist isn't going to be the ticket? Well, interestingly, over the last couple of years, Novo has abandoned a triple agonist, NNC 9204 or NN 9423. You can look this up, but it was a triple agonist, GLP-1 GIP glucagon, that was evaluated in an early phase 1 clinical trial and had adverse effects like dose-dependent increase in heart rate. We talk about this as being an issue with these glucagon drugs, glucagon being a cardiac stimulant, including, some of the opposite things that we're seeing with retatrutide, like impaired glucose intolerance, inflammation, all sorts of things. So really their version of triple G has not worked out well for them. So perhaps they're finding that the one in early phase clinical trials is not going to be the one. And so they set out to buy this asset from this Chinese company. Again, I believe it was United Laboratories. So they acquired this asset that won't come to market until probably 2030, conservatively, right? So why? Well, I do think that it has something to do with CagriSema. I think CagriSema was supposed to be this sort of bridge between tirzepatide and retatrutide, right? Something in the middle that it was supposed to come to market this year. We've seen Novo Nordisk push that launch date into 2026. So now it's going to be coming up ahead against retatrutide, which also is set to launch in 2026. You see that it's really failed to differentiate itself meaningfully from tirzepatide in the results. Now, we've talked a lot about the trial design of CagriSema and how there was no forced dose escalation no forced dose escalation, which there were obviously in the SURMOUNT trials for tirzepatide. But it's still had really high expectations, 25% weight loss over 68 weeks. It failed to hit that. And it was almost on par exactly with what we saw over 72 weeks with tirzepatide in the SURMOUNT trials, about 22.7% body weight loss. So it's failed to differentiate itself. That we also know that the head-to-head trial that they're running with CagriSema and tirzepatide has been extended by, I believe it was a month, maybe even 2 months. I think probably because they want to show a farther separation between people who are being treated with cagrilintide, CagriSema, and tirzepatide. But really, ultimately, what we're seeing is CagriSema has really failed to differentiate itself meaningfully. And so I think they saw that they had to do something else, because when we talk about some of the other things that'll hit the market before this potential UBT 251, we're talking about high dose semaglutide, around 20% weight loss with 7.2 milligrams. We're talking about oral semaglutide all the way up to 50 milligrams. A little bit lower weight loss with that, but kind of like more similar to injectable Wegovy. So it's just a very interesting move, and I think is probably indicative of maybe what's going on with CagriSema more than anything. That's just my own personal take on it. I think it's also interesting to see, yesterday we learned that they are going to be offering the pens of Wegovy for $499 cash pay. Of course, they dropped that news last week, but what they told us yesterday is you don't actually have to go through Novo's NovoCare pharmacy, their online pharmacy. It's going to be available for that cash pay price at all retail pharmacies. And so this is actually going to replace the $650 savings card for patients who have insurance but don't have coverage for obesity. So it replaces that card. You'll be a cash pay payer for any dose of Wegovy in the pens in the pens for $499, and that should be available at any retail pharmacy. Now, a big question that people have right away, well, what about people on Medicare? Well, this doesn't go through your insurance, so you should be able to, as a Medicare patient, go and pay the cash pay price for this medication, because again, it's irrespective of your insurance. It's a cash pay price for the medication. So I think that's an exciting thing. It sort of expands accessibility. It does reduce the cost of the medicine for patients who didn't have coverage. I think it's like a 23% reduction. That's a big deal for those people. I still find it fascinating that they launched the cash pay price at the same price that you can get the vials of Zepbound. Zepbound is much more efficacious, much fewer reported side effects. Interesting. I saw an article today about Amy Schumer. She's a comedian who has openly talked about her journey with her health and how she's used Ozempic in the past. She just came out with an article on how she's been using Mounjaro and how much better it's been working for her, especially from a side effect profile standpoint. Just a fun little anecdote there. I think it's interesting to hear, and kudos to anybody who's in the public spotlight who is willing to sort of share their journey to be able to take the stigma out of things by using their platform to talk about their medication. So kudos to them. So that is UBT 251, a triple agonist, probably 2030 before it hits the market. Lots more in between then. And I don't even think we talked about Mazdutide from Amgen. We didn't talk about Survodutide from Boehringer Ingelheim. There's other assets from other companies that will be hitting the market at the same time. So it'll be interesting to see how this one unfolds over the next couple of years. And the years go by fast, right? We are already 2 years into On the Pen. It's crazy to think about how much time has elapsed since we started this, and it's just gone by so fast. Want to take a moment to thank our sponsors today, Row. Row is the number one sponsor of On the Pen, both the podcast and the Thursday night show. We thank them. Of course, Row offers the Row Body program. Listen, patients are looking ever more in the direction of branded medications again, with all the uncertainty around the compound versions. Row is going to be the one to check out, folks. They have all the tools, the people, the systems, the processes in place to give you the best fighting shot at getting approved for branded medication. You can go to row.co/OTP for On the Pen and learn more about the Row Body program. They also have a checker tool that will basically allow you to upload your insurance information, find out what you're covered for. But again, they will fight for coverage for you for those branded medications if that's the route that you want to go. row.co/OTP. Of course, if you're looking at getting on any of these medications, you want to familiarize yourself with the medicines, what the potential side effects are, all of those things. And they're all available within a couple clicks at row.co/OTP. The Row Body program helps patients lose 15 to 20% of their body weight in a year when they couple these anti-obesity treatments like GLP-1 medications with lifestyle modifications. Just huge success. Row has some great studies put together that show patients on the Row Body program just experience tremendous success. They have a great platform. Check them out. Also want to thank our sponsors at Integrative Peptides. Integrative Peptides is a great sponsor here at OTP. Of course, if you're looking for some orally bioavailable peptides, over-the-counter nutraceutical peptides that may be able to help you on your journey, BPC 157 is one that patients really enjoy. It has been shown to really help with inflammatory issues, especially inflammatory issues of the gut when taken orally. If that's something you struggle with, maybe something that you might find some value looking into, you can check that out at the link in my bio, or you can go to integrativepeptides.com/on the pen. And you can use code OTP10 to save 10%. Make sure you plug that code in there, OTP10, to save 10% on your purchase from Integrative Peptides. But moving on into the next part of our show, we're going to talk a little bit about the nomination of Dr. Marty Makary, which should be going on very soon. Basically, March 14th, there was a cloture motion presented in the Senate indicating that a vote to end debate on the nomination is forthcoming. And as of now, the exact date for the Senate vote has not been scheduled. So I'm not sure what the hangup is here, but it will be very interesting to see once Dr. Makary gets in there, how does he approach this whole topic of GLP-1 accessibility, especially as it relates to the shortages, how they're reported, the ongoing trial between the Outsourcing Facilities Association and the FDA. Of course, tomorrow we have a special interview with Mr. Lee Rosebush of the OFA, the president of the Outsourcing Facilities Association. So we'll be interested to hear what his thoughts are on this, but we're awaiting Dr. Makari's nomination to see how will he approach all of these topics that are so near and dear to us at On the Pen. Now, we've covered a lot of things today. We've covered a lot about future medications, current medications, how that all affects patients and investors. I hope this was helpful for you. And if it was, I hope that you'll consider giving the podcast a 5-star rating and review. Wherever you listen to your podcast, that really helps other people hear this. We are consistently in the top 50 of the United States for medical podcasts, and we are there because of you and because of your thumbs up, your subscribes, all the ways that you push this out. Thank you for being an ally here at On the Pen and for your small form of advocacy. Every time you hit a thumbs up button, drop a comment, leave a review, those all help more information get out, more people get treatment for their disease. Thank you for being the best part of what we do here at On the Pen. Can't wait to bring you some amazing content this week. You got to make sure you stay tuned to our YouTube channel, where we're going to be dropping so much good information this week. And I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Thank you for being here.